Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm very excited about this guest because this is an individual who most of you have never heard of. This was actually the first time he's actually taped segments on Gospel Tangents. They'll be coming out later this year, but this will actually be the first time to an American audience that we'll be introducing a gentleman named Mathew Gill. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
And I just want to read a little bit of his biography. Mathew is 43 years old and has been happily married to Vicky for 21 years. He has three boys, ages 18, 11, and 7. Oh boy, I don't know how you do it. And he was born and raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but he has begun a church called the Restored Branch of Jesus Christ. It was established in October of 2006. He says it's been a roller coaster ride. And he's walking a new path, trying to figure things out and do his best. And I think we're all trying to do that, Mathew. And I just want to welcome you to the program. And folks, this is interesting to me because we're talking to, like I said, I'm talking to the full spectrum of the restoration. And Mathew is a person who about 10, 12 years ago, I discovered on YouTube. Now, who is this guy? And he's a prophet, and he has found lost records of a lost civilization in the British Isles, and it sounds like a very familiar story. But before we get there, Mathew, I think it's important that we talk about your background. Tell me about where you were born and your religious faith journey leading up to the restoration of your church.
Sure. I was born in Birmingham, in England, in the United Kingdom, which is like in the Midlands of the country. I was born into the LDS faith, blessed, baptized, grew up LDS, went to primary, nursery, the youth program, served a mission. So yeah, I mean, I did my background up until my early 20s was totally LDS, right from the cradle. So I was happy with that. I never wanted to leave. I never wanted to do anything that would upset the prophets of their church, or bring discord to what was going on. I was fully on board with everything, and but certain things happened to me when I was younger that set in motion the events that happened later. So when I was 12, I read the Book of Mormon for the very first time. I just moved up into the youth program from primary, and I was very aware that I didn't know what the Book of Mormon was really about. And so I went home, I think it was after church one of the days, and I said to my dad, I want to read the Book of Mormon, and I want to read it all. I don't want to wait. I just want to read it and see where it leads. And my dad was fully on board with that, and my mom, and so one night, I have the date here actually to my left. It was on the 12th of October in 1990. I took a Book of Mormon, one of those old blue Book of Mormons. They're really thick ones, not the thin ones. They're really thick ones with all the old pictures in. And I said to my dad, I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to read this. And it was during the day. And my dad said, I'll leave you to it and I'll check in on you later. And so I just went to my room and just, got stuff, snacks and drink. And so I wouldn't have to go anywhere apart from the bathroom. And just read. I just started to read. And I fell into this rhythm of reading the Book of Mormon for the very first time, and it was an eye-opening experience. I was learning about things that I'd never really given much thought to before, and it got me thinking about Joseph Smith and the implications of all of that. And this went on throughout the night, throughout the afternoon and the night. And it got to the point where I think I was, I don't know, maybe third Nephi, maybe. And I was beat. I was just, well, that's it. I tried my best. I couldn't read the whole thing in one sitting. So I was going to go to bed, and I tried to get out of my bed to turn all the lights off, and I found that whatever it was, there was a power holding me down, and I couldn't breathe, and I felt it as if it was really heavy, and I can still feel it now. It was like a heavy weight, and I was struggling against this weight, and I just said, help me, please help me. I wasn't saying it to anybody in particular, I don't think, just help me. And I was lifted, this weight was lifted, and I sprang out of bed, and I was like, what was that? What just happened? And it just struck my mind. I need to continue reading the book, even if it takes me all night. I'm dead beat, but I've got, I'm going to do it. My dad came in and said, "You're okay?" I said, "Yeah, but I've had this experience. I want to just continue reading." He said, "Well, we're going to bed, take care of yourself," type thing. And I just continued reading, read. Obviously slowly. I was only 12, but I got to the end of the book, and it got to the Moroni promise at the end, where it asks you to read these things and pray about them to ask if they're not true. And so I did. I decided I was going to do that, and I remember it very well. I put the Book of Mormon, on the bedside cabinet, and got out of bed and knelt down the side of my bed on the left-hand side of my bed. And I was in a pretty big room anyway. And I just started to pray. I wanted to know is this true? Because I've spent a lot of time investing in this. This thing happened to me. I couldn't breathe. What's going on? And as I was praying in that moment, I became conscious of a light to the left of me as I was kneeling against my bed. And at first I didn't think much of it, but it got brighter until it was coming through my eyelids. My eyes were shut because I was praying. And excuse me. And I opened my eyes and turned to my left, and I saw descending out of what I can only describe to people who've never seen it before as a brilliant white light. That's the best way I can describe it. And it descended out of this brilliant white light until he came and rested just off the bedroom floor. Didn't touch the floor at the bottom, just rested off of it as if he was floating in the air. And this person had a loose white gown on with a sash or a belt round the middle, and he was holding in his hands what I assumed at the time were the plates, the golden plates. Okay, and he spoke to me, and to cut a very, very long story short, right? He basically invited me to come and turn the plates. And I was very hesitant to do that. And he said, basically, "Don't worry, nothing will happen. Come and turn the plate." So I got up from my kneeling position and went over to him, and very gingerly pulled the leaf back on one of the plates. And it was very, very pliable, very thin. Not like you see in the artist depictions. They weren't all uniformed in cut either, which is an interesting thing. But anyway, I pulled one back. It made a noise as I pulled it back, put it over, and as soon as I did that, I knew that this was true, that these plates were real, and I knew who the personage was. And he basically said to me, to cut a very, very long story short again, you've been very privileged to see this. The Book of Mormon is true. However, stay faithful to the message, because later in life something important will happen to you, like what happened to Joseph. And as a 12-year-old, you tend to just, you take that in and you, okay. Or the message I got was stay faithful to the Book of Mormon, really. And then once that conversation had taken place, he folded them back over so they were in the place where he had originally held them, and basically wished me goodbye and ascended back the way that he had descended, and left the room in complete darkness. And I was left standing in a very dark bedroom, and I fell to the floor, and I don't know how long I was like that. But then I when I gathered my strength, I switched the light on, rammed open the door, went up to the landing of the house, knocking on my mum and dad's door. Dad, you've got to come. You've got to. And then I got my dad up at some really, really early hour, and we had a chat, and I told him everything that happened. And his first reaction to me was, "Well, I'll take your word for it. You're not given to telling me a lie." So, and we'll go and see the bishop as soon as we can. And that was that.
Okay, so this is really interesting, and I'm hearing this story for the first time. And so I want to ask you a few questions. First of all, was this the edition of the Book of Mormon similar to the one that you read?
That's exactly the one, yeah.
Okay. And this is the very first book of my collection.
Right.
I stole from a Marriott hotel in high school. So you said first of all, was this the Angel Moroni that appeared to you?
Yes,
Okay.
It was.
And you said that you actually handled and turned the plates.
I turned one leaf of one plate. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me the characters on the plates. How accurate is the characters document as a representation?
I've been asked that many times. Bear in mind, I was 12, and I wasn't really looking at the characters that closely. I would probably say, from my memory and looking at that character's document, I don't know. I wouldn't want to say they were really, really close, but I wouldn't want to say they were a mile off either. I have some doubts about that character sheet anyway now, but there certainly were characters on the page. I remember that. Whether they weren't, all I will say is they weren't exactly the same as what's on the character sheet.
Right.
And many people pick holes at that and go, well, you should have remembered. I was 12 years old. I was 12 years of age. This is a big thing that's happening to a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
I've raised a 12-year-old. Just believe me, I know their attention span isn't great.
Well, just real quick, when you looked at the pages, how small was the writing? Like, were the words, the symbols very large?
I could make out that there were characters on the actual sheet that I held. And you see, the plate itself for me wasn't that big. People, when they talk about the Book of Mormon, they always talk about this huge piece of metal, and that just wasn't my experience. It wasn't small either, but it wasn't huge. And the page was crammed. There wasn't an empty space on the page. So all I knew is there were characters on that page that I couldn't read, and I was very aware that I couldn't read them. But I didn't take that much notice of them. I was taking more notice of the white guy standing in front of me, holding this in the first place, asking me to turn a leaf of this thing over. And as I was turning it, I was looking at him anyway, up and down. And but as I say, the plate or the leaf I pulled over wasn't really that thick. I suppose if I'd have rattled it, messed about with it, it would have made a noise, a rattling noise maybe. I think I read somewhere that somebody, was it Emma Smith, said there was maybe as thick as common tin. I would probably say that's probably not far off what I was holding, something that thick. I mean, certainly strong enough for me to take one hand and pull it over, but it wasn't like a sheet of really thick gold.
So,
and anyway, I don't think they're gold. Anyway, I don't think they are gold anyway. But that's a different.
Okay, so now there are people, somebody who might be more naturalistic in their worldview, and they would say, okay, here you are, you're delving into the Book of Mormon, you're reading it, you lack of sleep, you're focused on it, and sometimes people, when they're like in these intense like moments, that they sometimes might be prone to having hallucinations. Maybe just tell me, was this a physical experience as real as being in the real world, or was this like a visionary experience?
No, this was as real as I could understand it to be. He certainly was there physically in the room. It wasn't like a dream or a closed dream or a vision in that sense. No, he was physically in the room. I tried to explain to people before just about, it's very difficult for me to try and tell you the brightness of the whole thing. We had some people investigate the branch a while ago when we were talking about this, and they asked me to relate the experience, and they said, well, how bright was it? And I still struggle to try and explain how bright it really was, other than to say that it was unlike any brightness I've ever seen, but it wasn't so piercing as I couldn't see it. And the personage Moroni did emanate sort of I suppose you would call it a glow or a presence from off his personage that got more intense the closer you got to him. But the whole room was just bathed in this. I can't really call it white either, because white's a terrible colour. It's not really colour, is it? But it was just white, just bright white. And that was a thing that really shocked me at first, was the magnitude of the brightness before I really comprehended the person in the brightness. So, but no, it wasn't a hallucination.
Okay. Now, were you afraid?
I never had a hallucination before or since. So.
Okay, so now when this all happened, were you at first afraid or startled? What was your reaction?
I was more not afraid. No, I never felt afraid. It was more of just a taken aback sort of what is going on. No, I've never felt afraid in the presence of an angelic messenger or being, ever.
Okay, interesting.
Never.
So you say now you tell your father the story, and your father is inclined to believe you, and he says, now we need to go speak with the bishop. Let's
I tell my dad. Yeah, we talk for a while, and he's like, well, I know you're not inclined to make this kind of stuff up. We'll sleep on it, I'll think about it, and I'll pray about it, and then we need to talk to the bishop, which is obviously the reaction you would probably expect from a faithful LDS father, I would imagine. And my dad was on the bishopric at the time, so probably more inclined to want to talk to the bishop about it. And so it came to the point where I did do that, where I sat in front of, and I won't name the person because I don't want to drag them into an already complicated situation. But I spoke to my bishop, and I received a reaction that I wasn't expecting to receive. Whether that was naive on my part, I don't know, but I think my dad was a little shocked by it as well. I sat in the office and I relayed what had happened to me best as I could. And obviously, the longer it goes, the more you have to rely on what you've written down. But I told him what I could remember, told him what I'd seen, who I'd spoke to, what they told me. And I remember it was, he had this big leather chair, he had this huge desk, and we were sat in these little green chairs, pop the opposite sides. So you're always like down, you know. And he sort of like went, and just stared at me. And that's quite intimidating for a 12-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I don't think you should be telling anybody about this. And I was like, why? Well, it could be problematic. Do these things really happen anymore? My dad jumped, oh, the prophet sees them. And then they got into another protracted discussion about who can see things and who can't see things. And I'm just sat there, I'm like, what's going on, you know? And basically the upshot was, don't say anything to anybody, because I really don't believe it. So, you know, be good, behave, because you're going to the temple next week. Whatever. You know, and that's how I left it. And the only people I really told were people who, obviously my immediate family, and I told a few other people. I didn't go into too much detail with them, but I told them I'd seen something, and I kept it to myself pretty much. I mean, you just had an authority figure in your life who is supposed to be chosen by God, apparently, to represent this part of the Lord's vineyard. And he says to you, I don't believe you, keep your mouth shut. So you tend to pretty much do that. My dad had an opposite view to that. He said, you know, it's your experience. You tell who you wish to tell, and you'll get no kickback from me. Just be careful. And I pressed him, and he said, I believe you. And my parents have never doubted anything. So, and then that was it. I went through the normal childhood stuff, you know. I went through the
Did you
youth
serve a
program.
mission?
Yeah. Then I went on my mission. But before I went on my mission, when you're 18, you have to go. You have to be set apart in the Malchester Priesthood. So it has to be done at stake level, and it just so happened that we had a state conference coming up when I was going to be called and set apart, and the state president asked me to go and see him in his office with my dad and with the bishop, and he said, you know, and they set me apart, did all that, and he said, I'm going to give you some time on the stand to, you know, bear testimony. He said, if you've got any experiences you want to share. I was like, yeah, I've got one. Me and my dad left the room, and the bishop stayed behind, so I don't know what happened in that conversation. But when I got up to the podium, I pulled the mic down, ready to start, I had a tap on my shoulder, and it was the state president. He said, just keep it short and sweet. Just keep it short and sweet. And I was like, all right. And I went into what I'd seen. And yeah. And
so you actually went up there and told
yeah,
some of the story. And what kind of response did you get?
Well, obviously at the time you just get looks, don't you, when you're coming down from the podium to sit down with your parents. You just get looks, you know. But I was working at the church distribution center at the time before I went on my mission to earn some money. And one of the guys who worked at the distribution was at that meeting. And I went into work on the Monday, and you know, he called me over and was like, "Oh, hi, how you doing? You know, did you enjoy the meeting?" Yeah. I said, that thing you said on Sunday. Oh yeah, the experience. Yeah. I wasn't impressed with that. It's like, what do you mean? So, well, I don't think we should go into too much of those sorts of details in public gatherings and things. You'd be best off not saying anything about it ever again. I wasn't really impressed. And his standing, in my estimation, fell straight through the floor for me. So I went on my mission when I was 18 with not reservations, but questions.
Hmm.
Why wasn't I allowed to share this thing? What is so damaging about it? I mean, okay, a 12-year-old sees an angel in the bedroom, sees the gold plates. What's so damaging about that? I don't understand why people are so afraid of it. I still don't understand why people are so afraid of it. And so out on my mission, you know, you go through experiences, don't you? And I didn't have a great mission anyway. I didn't really enjoy the experience as much as I probably should have done. And I came home early anyway. I only served 18 months, and I came back for health reasons.
Hmm.
And when I came back off my mission, I just felt lockstep into everyday LDS life. You know, go back to church, get involved, have whatever callings you're given, and then you just fall into a malaise of doing everything you normally do without really thinking about it. And that was really the place I was in, really. And I met Vicky at the distribution centre with my wife, and I told her about my experience, and she was on board with it. You know, she was really accepting of it, and got married in the temple. We moved, went to a new ward, had callings, elders quorum, missionary youth. I had callings. I served okay. Went through the temple a couple of times with Vicky. That became more and more increasingly uncomfortable. And then when was it? October again. It's funny how those things happen. October 2005 was when I had my adult experience, which totally led me down the path I'm on now.
Okay.
And away from.
Just want to
There's
just
a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of stuff there to take.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, first of all, where did you serve your mission?
I served my mission in Ireland.
Okay. And it didn't go very well. Did you talk to any of your missionary mates at all about your experience? Or did you just keep it to yourself?
Yeah. Not everybody I served with, but the ones I was comfortable with and had a good relationship with. I mean, I had what probably most young men have on their missionary experience, you know, unless they're completely really bought into the system. I had a good time, met a few nice people, you know, learned how to really look after myself on my own without my parents, you know, the things you do as an 18-year-old. And I won't say I didn't have spiritual experiences on mission, because I did. And I won't say that I didn't meet people I liked, because I did. I just didn't have what I considered to be a great time serving. It just, certain things happened on my mission that I was uneasy about. Certain people said things that I was uneasy about, and we got into doctrinal conversations. As a 19-year-old, you know, you're knocking on 20, aren't you? You know, you get into arguments about silly little scriptural things that really don't mean anything. You know, where was the hill Cumorah? Well, you know, where was it? Was it in South America, Central America, North America? Who cares? I mean, I have my personal view now, and I know now, but at the time it was a really big issue for me. And I had a lot of issues with the trajectory that the LDS Church was going with regards to what I was reading in church history. The two, for me, on my mission even, seemed to just part ways at the death of Joseph Smith. I couldn't marry the two things up again. And I just brought all that home with me and ruminated on it, really studied hard when I came back, and prayed a heck of a lot, and led to that experience in October 2005.
Okay. Well, I think this is good background, and the reason, you know, I wanted Mathew to get detailed here is because, you know, you're making truth claims, and you are making statements, and I feel it's like important that you tell your story, and then the audience can decide for themselves what they think. And this encounter, or whatever, how one would categorize what happened in October of 2005. Maybe, so you said earlier this was your second encounter, your first time as an adult. So
Yeah.
maybe talk to about that.
Okay, so since I was 12, I'd had nothing. Zero.
Okay.
Obviously, I had spiritual experiences, felt very close to God very, very many times, but nothing of that magnitude. And Vicky and I just moved into a new place, and we had I had my son. He was about 1.5, 2 maybe, and just life going along. And I was constantly praying. There's got to be more to this than what I'm doing. What do you want from me? I remember the promise I was made when I was 12, and I always thought about that, probably subconsciously, that something would happen. And I suppose because I was praying that night, it happened. And if I was to sum up the prayer from that evening, it was probably more of a, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? Because at the moment, it just feels like I'm treading water. I'm going to church, I'm reading the scriptures, I'm doing the stuff I'm supposed to be doing, but it just doesn't seem to be helping me. Not that I was in the throes of leaving the LDS church, because I wasn't. Without that, I was, very, very. But I just felt like I was treading water, running through treacle all the time. Nothing was happening, and it was the same old stuff. And I think the prayer that night was more like, "What do you want from me? Because I can't go on like this anymore. It's just ridiculous." I prayed, and then I went to bed, and I was awoken from my sleep. And as I awoke from my sleep, I saw at the end of the bed an angel. And the first thing I did was I looked left to my wife to see if she had seen it at the same time as I had. She was gone. She was out. And this angel was at the bottom of the bed, and didn't scare me or worry me or anything like that. And we exchanged a conversation, but not by speaking. We had a conversation, and he told me who he was and why he was there, and for me not to be afraid. He was always saying to me, "Don't be afraid." And I wasn't afraid, but it was nice and reassuring to hear him say, "Don't be afraid." And I had a conversation with the angel, who I know the name of if you'd like to know.
Please share.
Yeah, Raphael, the angel, was at the bottom of the bed.
Okay.
And we had a conversation. I was sat up in bed, and told me why he was there. And now was the time. This is what the Lord wanted. And soon there would come a record of the former inhabitants of Britain, which I'd never heard of before, and told me to prepare for that. But at the same time doing that, he also told me to read some scriptures. And I'm really cutting a lot of corners here, but it was basically, do you have this scripture? And I said, I have the King James Bible. And I said, you should know what I have, without asking me. And he told me to go and look at a section in the Doctrine and Covenants which dealt about dealt with the roles of the priesthood offices, the elders, the deacons, the elders, priests, teachers, and deacons, to read that fully and ask myself if I see any inaccuracies with what's going on that I'm doing. I was told to read again, which I'd already done anyway, numerous times, 3rd Nephi, all the way through. Concentrate chiefly on what the Lord says to the Nephites about other sheep he has, which are not of that fold. and then I was directed to read the creation story in the Bible, but not the Bible I had. I was told not to read that one. I was told to read from the inspired Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. And I didn't have one. I wouldn't even have known where to get hold of one. I wasn't even aware that they printed them, probably. Anyway, I took all this information, went away, told my wife what had happened, read the scriptures, and then over the course of events, I had other visitations from Raphael, in which he would talk me through scripture, ask me questions about what I'd learned, what I hadn't learned. And there's a big period of time, so it's like October 2005 right through to July 2006. So it's a fairly big period of time, and we're just talking about scriptures. We're talking about things that aren't in the scriptures. We're referencing material that I've never heard of before.
Well, let me just what I find interesting is that it's the angel Raphael. Now Raphael is in Enoch, and it's in the apocryphal Tobit or Deuterocanonical, because that's in the Catholic Bible. How familiar were you with Raphael before you had this visitation from him?
The only reference I had to an angel called Raphael was in the Doctrine and Covenants.
Okay.
Where he's mentioned once. Joseph Smith mentions it once in like a off-the-cuff comment, and that was it really. And it's not something I ruminated on or thought about. Some other angel. I mean, Joseph Smith saw so much stuff. It was the thing I want people to understand is, look, I'm being really, really blunt here. I don't really care whether you believe me or not. That's not my job. I just tell my story. I talk to people. I teach them what we know. I show them what we know. And if you want to believe that, then brilliant. If you don't, and you think that it's a complete fraud, then fair play to you. Carry on, do whatever you're doing. Whenever I retell these stories to people, I'm not doing it to try and prove anything that is true. I'm just here to tell you what happened to me. You make up your own mind. Now, on these videos, you're getting a very, very simplified version of what happens, because otherwise we'd be here till 12 tonight. So you're getting a very, 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 very condensed version of the story.
Well, okay, so this goes through July into July of 2006. You're having these conversations with Raphael.
And they're all documented in our Doctrine and Covenants. So
okay. Yeah. And that's your own version of the Doctrine and Covenants.
Every conversation's in there. Yeah.
Okay. And that's your own version of the Doctrine and Covenants that you have.
It is.
And is that available as a PDF to people if they wanted to check it out?
It can be, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we tend not to give out the Doctrine and Covenants to non-members, because the stuff in the Doctrine and Covenants about members that they might not want other people to know or read, or so when they've joined the restored branch and we're comfortable, then they. But no, I personally, if someone wants a PDF, I would ask them a series of questions before they want it. But it's there. It's not a secret. It exists.
Okay, very good. So I guess, because obviously we're getting into the details here, which is fine, and I'm enjoying this conversation immensely. I guess you're getting this preparatory, and it's also some of this stuff is in the Doctrines and Covenants. This all leads up to something that happens later in that year. Maybe talk about that.
Okay, so July. I'm just looking at the dates to the left, just in case anybody says on the video, oh, he's looking to his left, so he's looking at the creative centers of his brain. Now I'm looking to the left because my laptop's here. On my laptop, because I've got a series of dates. On the 12th of July 2006, I had an opportunity to see Joseph Smith, to see Jesus Christ, and to see the prophet Jeraneck. whilst having the experience, I wasn't aware of who he was, but I am now.
Got it.
So that's when I was set apart, if you like. I had a blessing from Joseph to tell me that, it was okay, and that's when I saw Joseph Smith and Jesus Christ and the prophet Jeraneck.
Jeraneck,
Cool.
that's an interesting name. It's not familiar to most people.
No.
And you didn't know at the time who he was. I guess this kind of just leads up to maybe you getting some knowledge or receiving some records about the civilization.
Right. So after the July 12th experience, revelation, however you want to call it, on the 16th of August in 2006, I had a dream. This is a dream now, not a vision. And in that dream, I saw Stonehenge. And above Stonehenge, I saw an angel floating above the stones. And the angel kept calling out, come to this place. It's important you come to this place. You need to come here. You need to come here. And I woke up the next morning and said, I've had this really weird dream about going to Stonehenge. I think it's really important we get down there. My dad's like, it's a heck of a long way to drive. Are you sure? I'm like, well, yeah, I reckon we should get down there pretty sharpish. Like, it's really important we're down there. And thought about it a couple of days. And on the 19th of August, my dad, I said, we've got to go. This is ridiculous. I've had a dream again. We've got to go down there. And so my dad, myself, and a friend of mine, who was involved in the early work, went down to Stonehenge. And we didn't have a clue why we were going down to Stonehenge, other than you had this dream and you're being called to Stonehenge. So we get to Wiltshire, which is a long way from where I'm living at the time. And we get to Stonehenge, and we pay to go through, as you do. And we get to where the stones are. My dad says, I think we should pray about this before we go around, because we drove a long way and we want something to be told to us if we're here. So my dad leads us in a prayer, and then we just walk off and we go round the stones. And as we get about halfway around the stones, I have an experience where I see the same person, roughly, who I'd seen in the July experience in heaven, which was Jeraneck, and he was looking out over the valley of Stonehenge, and it was like an open vision, and I saw him walking, and he had a box in his hands, and he walked past me into the temple. I had that experience, and then when I came out of that experience, I went back to my dad and my friend, and they said, you've just had an experience, haven't you? And I went, yeah, it was really strange. And, yeah, it's really weird, because when you walked away and you stood at the tape, all the birds on the stones just flew off. And when you'd finished, they all came back, and they were amazed. And we talked about it all the way home. And then, getting to the real stuff, on the 23rd of September, which was a Saturday, the records come, the plates, and that's when it all just goes from experiences to this is real, this is wow, yeah.
Okay, so you receive physical plates on September 23rd, 2006.
Yes.
Okay. How did you get them?
Well, I didn't receive them. My father did.
Okay.
We were at their house, my wife and I and my son, and I think we'd stayed late for a meal or something. And my wife said, I don't want to travel back. Let's just stay in the spare room. Okay, all right. And I like to sleep in on a Saturday, so she was up early with Levi, and I was in bed, and I heard a noise, a ruckus downstairs, and then all of a sudden, Matthew, you've got to come down, you've got to come down. I was like, what's going on? And my dad was going, Matthew, you've got to come down, get up. So I get up, get dressed, go down the stairs, and as I'm walking down the stairs, I see my dad's holding a box, a small wooden box. I was like, what's that? He goes, Vicky found it. I was like, oh, okay. And Vicky goes, yeah, it was so weird. I went to open the front door, but as I opened the front door, I knew something was there. And then my dad saw what was there, and he was like, oh, I'll take care of this. And apparently, because I wasn't there, he said he saw a person walking away from the house who looked back at him as he picked up the box off the doorstep, and he picked it up, brought it in the house, and that's when they started calling me, and I came downstairs, and my mum said, I think you better go into the dining room and see what this is about. So he and I went into the dining room, and we had a discussion about what we should do. Should we open this thing? Matt, what's going on? I was like, I don't know. And he told me what happened. And I was like, okay, well, I think we should pray first before we open this thing, because we don't know what's in it. We don't know all I know is that we were told we would have some records, and now it looks like they're here. So we need to pray about this first. And we prayed, and I proceeded to open the box and examine what was in it. And that's when we found the two sets of records in the box, with what I call the translators or interpreters. And then after we'd examined them, we put everything back in the box.
Okay, well, let me stop you there, because we're talking about physicality and items. So you said, we had talked earlier how you said you had one that was, I think you said 10 plates, and another that was 24 plates. Both were made slightly different alloys, as I recall, different metals. Talk about those, but I also want you to describe to me these interpreters. What did they look like, and how did they feel, and what were they made out of?
So the box is very small. Okay. Don't imagine this big, huge wooden, but it was a very small box.
Like the size of a shoebox, or what?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit smaller.
Okay.
But it was very crudely made. You could tell it was old, and had seen a bit of wear and tear. But that didn't really interest me as much as what was in the box. Anyway, the box is open. There was on top of the box, there was a small package, a leather package, small leather package, say about yay big. Okay, so I take that off, put it on the table. Under that, there is another package, which ends up being the 24 plates. Okay, so take that out of the box, put that on the side. And underneath the 24 plates were another set of plates, but there was only 10 of them. And they were, instead of being, instead of being that shape, they were that shape. Mm-hmm. And so I took those out of the box, and then we examined them. And so the 24 plates were like a brass plate, and they were very thin, very, very, very flexible. If you shook them, they'd make a metallic sound. Not that I did that very often, but made a metallic sound. There was inscriptions on them all over the page. Turning it, inscriptions on that, and the same was for 24, just full of inscriptions. And then the set of templates was different. and it was in different writing as well. The writing style was bigger, bolder, and it was just different. And those were like a copper color, if that makes sense. So it was like a brass and a copper color, and you could smell on those, especially the smell of that coppery smell. And then I examined those, and I knew they were totally different just by looking at the characters on the plates. And then once I'd done that, my dad said to me, "Well, we're going to open a smaller package," and I was like, "Yeah, just let me get my head around this first." So we unpacked the little leather pouch or package, and they were the interpreters. Now, have you ever seen? The best way to describe them are what can I use as an example? Have you ever seen the movie The Name of the Rose?
A long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, with the glasses that had this like pointed. They were round, huge round things, and they're not like glasses. I wear glasses, and nothing like that. And they were just these two big round lenses, and they were joined together with like an arch. Okay, like a really, really, really ancient pair of spectacles, if you like.
It's interesting because have you read the Lost 116 Pages book by Don Bradley?
I have now, yeah.
Have you seen what he describes as the interpreters? Is it similar to what you looked at?
Yeah, I suppose.
Okay.
In essence, yeah. I mean, the only thing that was really that really stuck out to me about them was that one lens was blue and the other lens was red, which was a bit odd because I'd never seen that, and I'd never seen. I keep saying glasses, but they're not really. I'd never seen anything like that big before. When I put them on, they probably covered that much of my face, and they didn't have any arms or anything, and we had to think of an ingenious way of keeping them on while we were working, but that's beside the point. So there was those. That was it, and then on the outside of the lens around the frame, if you like, were inscriptions. And that's what was in the box: 2 sets of plates and a set of interpreters.
Okay, so did you take any photographs? Did you maybe artistic renderings of these items, anything like that?
I've been asked about photographs before, and I've always said no. I've not taken photographs of these things. I was astute enough to know that they were special, and I was astute enough to know that there was a reason they'd come to me and nobody else, or at least to the people I knew and nobody else. And so I didn't, just like I didn't whip my phone out and take a picture of an angel. I mean, I've been asked that before. Why don't you take a picture of the angel? Well, because you just don't do that, do you? Oh, hang on a second. I'm just going to get my phone and take a picture. I mean, it's not a conversation you have, is it? There were other things. There were other things going through my mind and everybody else's mind, other than, and this is going back to say 2006. So it wasn't like, we had iPhones. I just whip an iPhone out and say, oh, I've got a great iPhone, but it never occurred to me ever to go, hang on a second, we've got to get a Polaroid of this. Just lay them out. That never occurred to me as being a really important thing to do. I've had people draw pictures of what they've seen, just for their own, records and stuff. But I never felt it necessary to take a picture. I just didn't think it was something I should be doing with these things. pictures and photos and stuff like that. I mean, I was very careful about who I showed them to, let alone taking pictures and stuff, especially not putting them on the internet.
So I'm just curious, because obviously you say there's multiple witnesses. How many people looked at them, maybe touched them? How many would you say these are witnesses to these?
Okay, so there's my father, friend, my mom. So I'll probably say about 5 people max. So there's enough people there for it not just to be a me experience. My dad looked at them, my mom looked at them, my friend looked at them, held them, you know, moved the plates, felt the inscription on the plates, held the interpreters, tried the interpreters, sometimes successfully, other times unsuccessfully. So yeah, I'd say about five people maybe tops that saw it.
Okay, so now do you have, so before we get into the content, and well, I mean, this would ultimately, I'm guessing, would become the book of Jeraneck. Do you have a witness statement like the 3 and the 8 witnesses in your edition?
Well, there's my statement, my father's statement, and my friend's statement, and my mom's statement.
So you have 4 different separate statements. Okay. Okay, very good.
Telling that they've seen them and that they, you know, this is what they think they are.
Okay. Okay. So, okay, this is, I mean, you know, of course, I'm just very interested in hearing your story. This is fascinating to me. And of course, you know, it's, I guess the thing I want to emphasize is that to you, there's a tangibility. This is real, physical plates. I am curious, who do you know who was the individual that dropped the plates off at the house?
We do now.
Who was
at
it?
the time. It was crikey, this is going to get complicated unless you know the story. This was Jeraneck, the son of Jeraneck.
Okay.
So at the very end of the book of Jeraneck, Jeraneck says something about his son taking a few people into the country's north. I've got some maps I'll show you in a minute.
Yeah.
Into the country's north to escape the destruction of the people. Now we know that Jeraneck is still alive, that he has never tasted death.
Okay.
A bit like, I suppose, one of the 3 Nephites, or if you believe John the Revelator, maybe. So he's still alive, and he was the one that brought his father's record to our house.
Okay. Now, we're an hour into this, and we just are getting started with the scripture. And I think what I'd like to do is for us to, I want you to briefly describe the translation process, how long it took, and then let's start talking about the book.
Okay, so let me just double check all these dates. Okay, so we started translating on the 1st of October 2006, and we finished on the 10th of December 2006. So it took about 10 Sundays because we only translated on a Sunday.
Oh, really? Was that because was there a spiritual reason for that?
Yes. Before we started work on anything, we all took turns praying about it individually, and then we prayed together, the 3 of us. Then we prayed together as a family about it, and then other people who were involved who weren't family, we all prayed about it together. And we hadn't organized. We'd all left the LDS church by this point. Okay. So we'd all left the LDS church. We weren't tied to the LDS church in any way, shape, or form at this point. And we hadn't organized ourselves into an organization or anything of that kind. And questions started to be asked by my dad and other people. Look, you know, we've got these plates. What are we going to do about, you know, sacrament and stuff? How's it? So we prayed about when we should translate, and we were told definitely translate on Sunday after you've partaken of the sacrament. And we went back and said, well, we don't partake of the sacrament because we're not organized as an organization. So none of that's in place. So on the behest of my father, not mine, I went back to the Lord and said, is this, if we formed an organization, is this something you would be comfortable with us doing? Is this something you would allow us to do and you would be okay with us doing? And I got a reply that it would be okay for us to organize ourselves into some kind of church, but we had to do certain things before we could, organize ourselves. So the translation really fitted into us having our very first branch meetings. And then we'd have our branch meetings, finish Sunday school, have, say, about 20 minutes break, and then go into translating after Sunday school. And then we probably spend about, I want to say about an hour and a half translating material. But during that translation process, things would happen that would cause you to stop. So it wouldn't be a continual 1 hour translation process. For example, the person involved with us at the time, who will remain nameless because for various reasons, but he was involved. He had experiences where he saw his mother, and he wanted to talk about that. And my father saw his father, and we saw Joseph Smith, and there was these comings and goings in the room while we were translating, and then of course the translation process itself, which I'll get to now. I'd have I'll take the 24 plates, which is the main book of Jeraneck. So I have the plate in front of me, or the book in front of me, if you like, and I would where the interpreters or the translators, and from right to left, I would see above or below the character either a word or a sentence, and then if a word or a sentence wasn't appropriate, I would be shown a scene to explain the scene rather than to read the scene. So either a word or a sentence, or I would actually see and explain to them what I'm seeing, and then they would write that down.
Okay, so this is partially a literal translation where you're translating words, but it seems to be it's also visionary in that you are so you're encountering and engaging these plates, and it's almost as if as you're reading it, the story comes alive, and then you're describing that to them.
Sure, because there wouldn't be a direct English translation of the word or the sentence that would fully convey the meaning of what he was trying to say. So the best way to do that was for them to show me. And then I would say, this is what I'm seeing, this is who's speaking, blah, 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 and they'd write that down. But the majority of the time, it was taken directly from the plates. I mean, that visionary experience only happened, with each plate probably maybe 2 or 3 times. But the rest was actually, from off the plate I was working with, or the page I was working with.
So the 24...
And then my dad and my friend would sit either side, and they would just write what I said or what I explained.
And so they were handwriting it?
Yeah.
They weren't typing it like on a computer or anything? You felt that had to be written down?
Yeah, well, it was just the easiest thing for us to do.
Okay.
Pads of paper. You don't have to worry about your battery going out or anything. So it's just write. Use your hands. Just write. Don't worry about full stops or paragraphs. Just write.
And did you record them? Did you do audio recordings of these as well?
When we initially did it, no, we didn't. My dad suggested we do that on a later project.
Okay.
That we worked on, but not for the Book of Jeraneck. No, we pretty much kept it pretty basic, and which was basically 2 people writing down what I said. And then sometimes they would say to me, well, can we look?
Hmm.
And I'd be like, yeah, sure, if you really want to. And they would put the interpreter on. And sometimes they would see something and they would say what they're seeing, and then it would disappear, or sometimes they just wouldn't be able to do it. So it was a very hit and miss for those two. But for me, it wasn't a hit and miss thing. It was pretty. I mean, I don't want to sound like like arrogant or anything, but it was a pretty simple process. There was nothing complicated about it.
Hmm. So, okay, so the 24 plates are the Book of Jeraneck. And what about the 10 plates? What are those?
Okay, at the back of the Book of Jeraneck, the very end of the actual book itself, there is what's known as, and I'm looking at it now, the records of the religious practices of the followers of God. And on those 10 plates were the basic workings of their general theology. So we learned from that prayers they would say, and why they would say them, how they would conduct a marriage service, how they would conduct the sacramental service, baptismal service, the things they would say and do. So everything to do with their basic theology. If you hadn't read the Book of Jeraneck, you could read the 10 plates theology, and you could pretty much pick up what they were doing.
Okay, so this is kind of how Moroni at the end of the Book of Mormon kind of describes like how to do like a church and how it's supposed. Okay,
yeah, similar. Yeah,
okay, so let's just you wanted to show some slides. I think why don't you just kind of give us an outline of the story of the Book of Jeraneck?
Okay, well, I'm going to try and show you some slides.
Sure.
So just bear with me here.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll
And Matthew, are you open for coming back for a second interview?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, because I have a feeling we've gotten so deeply involved in this whole thing, it might be worth you coming on, because I think we're going to talk about your scriptures, and then I think what we like to do is talk about. Okay, well, screen sharing is going on.
Okay.
Right, so start telling the story.
Okay, so the story of the Book of Jeraneck starts here at the bottom with the plains of Shinar at the Tower of Babel, and the confounding of the languages, and just being really, really brief. The people of Jeraneck are allowed to keep their original language, so they don't have their language changed at the tower. They are aware of the Jaredites at the same time. And what happens after the destruction of the Tower of Babel is they move northward. They skirt the eastern part of Turkey. They go across the Ural Mountains into, I suppose, what you would call the Caucasus region of Russia today. They stop near the Volga River. And at the Volga River, they split off into two separate people groups. So at the Volga River, Jeraneck dies and gives the leadership of his people to his son, Jeraneck. However, his elder son, Lionek, believes that he should have had the birthright. So there's some falling out. Lionek takes his people further eastwards into what would be today Kazakhstan area. Jeraneck takes his people westward through the Ukraine, parts of northern Hungary, basically across into Western Europe, until they reach Karnak in Brittany in France. And at that point, they're commanded to build some ships, which they do, and they sail off into the Bay of Biscay, not quite hitting the Atlantic Ocean. And then they are turned around by the hand of the Lord, and they make landfall in England. So let me stop that share.
Yeah.
Let me share with you another map that I have that will give people an idea.
So I know how many people were on those boats.
Oh, hundreds.
Okay.
Okay, so let me just. Okay, so this is a map of the UK, and at the very bottom of that map is where they made landfall, and they went up onto the land, it says, and they came to basically what is today known as the Stonehenge landscape, and they built a city, erected a temple, which we believe Stonehenge is a remnant of, and they stayed there for a very, very long time in that southern area of the country to the west, around that area, Wiltshire, around that area, and then there's a migration northwards by three brothers who go looking for a set of people who the Lord has told them of exists. So they go north to where I live at the moment in Derbyshire, and they find another set of people, another group of people, and they become basically friends, and they become one people, and that's when the land extends, and basically the Book of Jeraneck takes place upon the whole of the British Isles. So it takes place in very far north in Scotland, and takes place in the very, very far south, which would be like Wiltshire, where the Stonehenge is, and as far east as Norwich, less so Wales. But that gives you a rough idea. And obviously, if you know the Book of Jeraneck, there's places up on here like the port of Nishon, the Battle of Hodea, where important things took place on there. So it just gives you a rough idea of the geography of what I'm talking about.
Okay, so roughly, just give me some dates here. When did they make landfall, roughly?
Okay, so I've been asked this before. Let me just stop this because there we go. I've been asked that before, and what I've always said to people is I'm not sure about the exact dates because they measure time differently to us. Like, for example, I know they had a 14-month year, which we don't. And the only thing I do know is that the timeline of the Book of Jeraneck runs pretty parallel to the timeline of the Jaredites.
Okay, so that puts us, because this, okay.
Yeah. Okay. And I always say give or take 50 years at the end because
Okay.
it wasn't exactly the same. It's roughly the same parallel.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking thousands of years ago, aren't we? So the majority of the story takes place in the British Isles, however.
Okay, so you had said that their language was not confounded. So is that to say that the Jaredites and them both spoke the Adamic tongue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting.
I mean, I don't know where. I would imagine that over time those languages did shift apart. But yes, originally they all spoke Adamic. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and so obviously within the context of your scriptures and beliefs, the Tower of Babel was a literal event. I'm assuming Noah's flood and all that happened, worldwide flood.
Yeah, we would subscribe to a pretty literal view of the scriptures: flood, creation, Tower of Babel, that kind of stuff.
You would also say that you would consider yourself like a young Earth creationist?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those issues that I don't really have an issue with. I mean, I believe in creation. I'm not an evolutionist by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't understand why there is such a big controversy over the issue. Look, you either believe in God and the creation or you don't. If you don't believe in God and the creation, you've got to believe something. So science gives you an answer. It gives you an out, doesn't it? It gives you an opportunity. If you don't want to push the envelope to say, well, I believe in evolution, without really knowing what you're talking about. The science of evolution is very complicated. It's not all what it seems. And there are inconsistencies with evolution, just as there are inconsistencies with the creation story. There isn't one of those issues that doesn't have complications. And the reason it has complications is because over time people inflect what they want to inflect on those theories. There's no, we read the Bible and we read the creation story, and it is different in the inspired version of the Bible, granted. But that's somebody's interpretation of an event. So they're going to put on those events their own twists and spins and interpretations. But that doesn't stop me believing that God created the planet, the earth, the stars, or me.
Okay.
And I don't understand why you would, just because you walk away from the LDS church, why you suddenly have to jump into an evolutionist theory of view of the world.
Okay. Well, the story is very fast. I mean, it's a lot for me to digest here, because I'm hearing a lot of this for the first time. I'm enjoying this, and it's fascinating. I almost feel like maybe we've reached that point where we could shoot a part 2 and actually tell the story of Jeraneck, but then also talk about the other scriptures that you've encountered. I really feel like this. I don't want to rush through this. I feel that.
Right. I'm happy to do that. That's fine by me.
So then what I'd like to do is, so we're going to talk about on our next episode, we're going to talk about your scriptures. I want you to tell the story. And then I'm going to have questions about your church and maybe your doctrines, your practices. So I think what we'll do, folks, is we're going to have Mathew come on back onto the program. Let me just get out of here, get in the gallery.
Sorry, I took up a lot of your time.
Yeah, this is really good, and I'm really glad, because, I feel like it's important to document these stories. And then my audience, I have a lot of Christians that watch my program who are interested in just doing research and studying the restoration. And you are a manifestation of the restoration. And so your story needs to be told. And I just want to, first of all, just thank you, Mathew, so much for coming on my program today.
You're welcome.
And do you have any final words you'd like to share with my audience?
Probably no, I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe after part 2, I might.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, because you had mentioned you wanted to talk about things you hadn't talked about before. I want to give you an open forum so we can have these conversations. Maybe we'll have you on for 2 more segments. I don't know. We'll see where this goes, folks.
Cool.
This channel is an adventure, and I'm on this journey of exploration. And I'm so glad that my audience is able to participate on this journey with me. I hear so much positive feedback from so many people for what I'm doing, and I want to thank all of you. I just want to remind everybody to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification button to be informed when the new episode comes out. Also, we are on all the major platforms, Apple, Spotify, and Google. Anthony's in the process of getting it updated, and hopefully we'll get everything up and running soon. Also, those of you who want to support the channel on Patreon, and I also want to thank those of you who are donating to the channel. Thank you so much for your patronage. It is greatly appreciated, and it helps us upgrade equipment and also finance travel expenses as well. So thank you so much. So I just want to remind people to have yourself a great day, and God bless. And thanks again, Mathew, for coming on.